almost 2/3 of nurses, around 62%, experience burnout. It's especially among younger nurses, with 69% of nurses under 25 reporting burnout. As someone that is really focused in this space, can you talk about your expertise in this area?
Yeah, so this is a multi-factored, multi-layered conundrum that different people are trying to solve. And I have a little bit of an unconventional, radical view on it. I personally...
Hi, everyone. Welcome again to Medical Practice Success Secrets. I'm Theo, Harvey, your host. And every week, I'm here to strive to give you the best and greatest insights on how to move your organization forward toward the future of healthcare. I'm so honored today to have an amazing nurse entrepreneur, Tiffany Gibson. Tiffany, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm actually in a really good mood today. Thanks for asking.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, we are recording this on a Friday, so it's always good to have great opportunities to be excited about the next steps and having time to relax a little bit. So, Tiffany, I brought you on this podcast today to really talk about something that is affecting the industry. We know that a lot of healthcare organizations, they're looking to kind of help nurses navigate the new normal when it comes to job. But recently, I saw a survey about the American Nurse Association that says almost 2/3 of nurses, around 62%, experience burnout. It's especially among younger nurses, with 69% of nurses under 25 reporting burnout. As someone that is really focused in this space, can you talk about your expertise in this area? But more importantly, what is going on? Why are nurses experiencing such a high degree of burnout in the industry right now?
Yeah, so this is a multi-factored, multi-layered conundrum that different people are trying to solve. And I have a little bit of an unconventional, radical view on it. I personally don't subscribe to the term burnout because I feel by the time you get to burn out, you have missed multiple flags that let you know that you are headed in that direction. Burnout is to the point where there's no more. There's exhaustion. You think something that has literally burnt out, there's crisps left. There's nothing there. And so what happened to the yellow flag, the orange flag, the maroon flag, before it turned into the red flag to let you know that you are heading in that direction? Because no one wakes up and says, I'm burnt out. It's something that happens, and it's a slow burn over time until there's a fire, right? And so I think there's some personal accountability that nurses need to take when we talk about burnout. Now, because this is the topic of conversation and it is trending, there are organizations that are focused on burnout and ways that we can combat it, overcome it, prevent it, which all of that is fine and needed in this space. However, if nurses do not take individual accountability, taking days off, going to the spa, going to my favorite restaurant doesn't stop the slow burn. It probably just slows it down a little bit. Because here's the thing about burnout. One, there are lots of issues with staffing within nursing. The people who are currently working in nursing are asked to do more with less. So it's an overextension of self. You're working a lot of hours. You're working multiple days in a row. You're working with lots of patients. You're working with providers and other staff members who are grumpy. And all of that is taxing on you mentally, physically, and emotionally, which can accelerate the burn. But also, burnout is not doing what you enjoy. And so if you are in a position, if you're in an industry, if you are in a role, a location that just doesn't serve you, it's not bringing you joy and happiness, then that's already burnout within itself. Regardless of what you're doing physically every day, you don't want to be there. And because you don't want to be there, that is the forefront of your mind. When you are driving to work and you park your car and you're sitting in the garage, you are waiting to go inside until the last minute. That's mental burnout, and that can accelerate the feeling even more. So I think there is an operational issue in nursing where there's not enough people doing the roles that we need to safely. I think working 12-hour shifts can be a lot for people. Asking people to work more and doing more with less is an issue. But then also internally as nurses, what are we doing to prevent this for ourselves? Say no. Don't feel obligated, or find a role in the job that best fits your love language to prevent the burnout.
I love that. And so we talk to medical practice owners, healthcare organizations all the time. And the thing they're struggling with is, finding great mid-levels or nurses to replace. Turnover can be high in these organizations. And I think you nailed it. Problem is that overwhelm. They're doing too many different things. They're wearing multiple hats. And as an entrepreneur myself, as you can attest, right? Sometimes you wear all these different hats. Some hats you're good at, some hats you're not, but you have to wear them. But there comes to a point you have to take some of those hats off and hand it to someone else to kind of handle that piece of it. So you don't become overwhelmed, and that's when the burnout creeps up. So I think that is something. Have you thought about it? Obviously, I know you work directly with nurses to kind of handle and identify those problems beforehand, and we'll talk about that in a second. But what can organizations do, right, to help nurses identify these flags, like you mentioned before, right? The maroon flag, right? The yellow flag before you get to the red flag. What can an organization do so that they don't have that high turnover because the nurse and the staff is just tired and they're done with everything?
As somebody who is in a management position right now in nursing, I can tell you that the answer for that is hiring more. That is the answer. You need to invest more money in recruitment and retention to keep the people who enjoy being there, and to get more people on board to decompress some of the workload. That would answer a lot of problems. Organizations need to think about the long-term investment pouring into their staff by way of hiring more people to do the work, because it is not fair that nursing ratios have changed. We already know the acuity of patients that we're caring for has changed. So patients are sicker, but we are expected to do more, and we're expected to be super efficient. So what happens to the humanity of us? As nurses, we are taking care of humans, but then what happens to my humanity as you're asking me to deliver and produce at this high level all day? And at some point, I'm not going to be able to do it. At some point, you have to power off. You have to control alt delete, even your computer. It will produce and do what you want to do. And at some point, it's going to say, I don't have any more to give. Right? I am at capacity. And so to alleviate just some of the tangible things that nurses are asked and required to do, you have to just hire more staff, hire more people, and make sure that your nurses are working at top of scope and top of license. So does that mean increasing the amount of LPNs in some places to take some of the burden off the RNs? Increasing more medical assistants or CNAs? Yes, maybe that's the answer. To allow the registered nurses to work at their top of license and scope, and then everybody else can, and it shares the wealth a little bit differently.
I like how you put it, top of license and scope, right? I think a lot of times RNs and MPs are doing things that, are they the right person to do that when the MA could do that world, right? And I agree. I think there needs to be a little bit more structure in some organizations. And I get a lot of the organizations we work with are smaller businesses, for lack of a better term. So hiring more people is also something that can be scary. But to your point, if you structure it right, if you have an RN paired with an MA, for instance, or you kind of work together in tiers, you know who's doing what and who's operating at the highest level, then you maximize both. And also you get more efficiencies out of them because, to your point, they're not burned out because they're wearing all these different hats. That is definitely something we see that as well, because that's so key to really understand the structure. And then you had mentioned hiring more. How can they help bring them on board faster, right? Are there some policies and practices that you've seen that work well from a training standpoint that can help accelerate the adoption of new nurses? Because it's great to hire people, as you know, there's always that onboarding period of time before they get enmeshed into the organization and the culture. So you put all this money up front to find the right person, the right cultural fit. But then now you have to deal with, onboarding into your way of doing things. Have you seen best practices around that to get the nurses embedded into the organization?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of faster to get someone on board, because that sometimes runs the risk of shortcuts or that person not being mentally ready to be independent or off orientation, and that can lead to increased attrition. I would say it starts with the recruitment and having an evergreen recruitment system where you don't only post when you have a vacancy, but you have an evergreen requisition, always open, always front facing to the public, and you're constantly screening for candidates. And that when you have a vacancy, it's a more streamlined transition from recruitment into hiring, because usually that takes a lot of time. The recruitment process, the hiring process, what I find takes a lot of time. And because that time is spent on that part of the process, once the person starts, it's like, well, how can we get them up and running? Because we've already been waiting 8 weeks for them to get here. But now you're taking away from their learning and their experience, which we should not accelerate. Because if we don't have people that have the confidence and the competence to do their job, they're going to leave because they don't feel comfortable, or they're going to leave because they did something wrong. There's definitely ways to structure onboarding. There's ways to make sure that there's standardization and checklists. But then outside of the checklist of the tasks that need to be done, we also need to see, how is this person psychosocially ready to do the job? Because that is a huge component that's often missed. And so is there a clinical mentor that we can pair them up with? Is there a way that we can elongate their runway to independence by putting them in cohorts, or having them do some pre-learning work so that when they're in the clinical setting, they can do the tactile things? There's definitely ways that we can maximize the orientation without having to speed it up, because we don't want to risk safety and competency just to get someone independent and off orientation.
No, that's a great point. The pre-work, something that we advocate, video training, making
Mhm.
sure people go through that first, and then obviously working and doing the job itself, right? That helps a lot with onboarding individuals. Also, my organization, we hire nurses as well for remote type positions. And so that's kind of things that we really advocate as well, that
Mhm.
pre-work beforehand. And then to your point, the ongoing recruiting process, right? Being able to reach out and having call outs that speak to people that will fit your culture, right? And making sure they fit properly into your organization so that the onboarding process is a lot smoother. And so definitely, I
Mhm.
think those are really key. I do want to double click a little bit on your unique position and what you're kind of focused on, because I think that really dovetails nicely into how organizations think about it. If they can kind of think about like what nurses need. So I know you have a unique way of how you help nurses navigate themselves individually so they
Mhm.
can see those warning lines. First of all, talk about what you do specifically for nurses and how that works. And then also, how can organizations help with that effort, right? To kind of give the nurses that what they need.
So I have a nursing professional development consultancy, New Nurse Academy, that I've had since 2018. And it started off as an NCLEX tutoring prep service back in 2017 and 18 when I was a clinical instructor. Now with my own personal and professional development, and now that I'm on the other side of nursing and the bedside, I'm in management and leadership, I recognize that even for student nurses who are trying to study for their boards, up until nurses who've been around forever, the emotional, social, and divine intelligence that's needed for this work is where a lot of the education and development needs to be. And that's what I do. So I coach nurses on how to increase their personal power through emotional, social, and divine intelligence. And I help organizations do training on leadership and nursing retention by helping them see how emotional intelligence helps in all areas like diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, continuing education, leadership, succession planning, and retention. And so that's what I do with New Nurse Academy, helping nurses have a new mindset of how they want to show up as their most authentic self in this very tough profession. And having these skills and tools will prevent burnout, would have them advocate for themselves and their patients differently, would have them be productive and efficient on a different level because they know themselves truly inside and out. And they are making sure that whatever they do speaks to their love language. And so that's what I do at New Nurse Academy. Also, I am a full-time nurse manager in pediatric primary care. And so I integrate my theory from New Nurse Academy with my own team. I have a team of 104 staff members that report to me over 6 clinical practices. And I do this in real life. I should. So not only am I helping nurses individually and I'm on social media, but like I really integrate everything that I have put into place with my own personal team and making a ruckus as a leader to say, this is not how we should do things. Like, we really should be looking at this differently. And what about the nurses? Or what about the humanity of things? That's what I do to help organizations and nurses just look at how we approach nursing and development differently.
I love it. And, as organization that hires nurses, we'll probably need to talk offline about how you can help our organization, right? Because I think that's key. Personally, my wife is an RN. She was at bedside for a couple years, just like a lot of nurses. Potentially the pandemic got a lot out of her, right? It just was painful to deal with that, going to bedside. And so she's like, I don't want to be bedside anymore. And so she found a
Mm-hmm.
remote position, and that helped her, through that process, not just with the pandemic, but just in general. They're just asked to do more, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
nurses, and they struggle with that. And so to your point, having training that speaks to those other areas that can help. Yes, the clinical is going to get done. You're going to know your stuff, that you have to follow the workflows. But if you can address, and I think that's important for everybody, address the other needs, the emotional needs, right? The divine needs, the other
Mm-hmm.
needs that really drive you. I definitely believe in that area as well. You realize as you get up in management, or if you have ownership, or you start to realize managing people is really the soft skills, right? The emotional connection, the other stuff that's really going to take you further, because at the end of the day, people are people. And so, yes, there's projects and lists and all that. And we'll talk a little bit about technology's role here. But I think people are always going to be people. And the better you become at communicating and connecting with
Mm-hmm.
people, the better you have in getting better results. And so I think, what you communicate, if more organizations took this training and helped their nurses, they would see lower turnover, higher
Yeah.
engaged employees. And so I think that's something that can be taken across healthcare, right? Which unfortunately has been this fee for service volume play for way too long. And so a lot of folks are not having energy or excitement about it, because they came to help people, but then there's all this other stuff they have to do, and they
Yeah.
struggle. So I just want to kind of, commend you on that work effort. Let's talk a little bit about technology, AI, artificial intelligence. That's a big buzzword in healthcare. Big thing for organizations right now. They're looking at artificial intelligence to maybe look for clinical
Mm-hmm.
opportunities to reach patients. We don't believe in that. We believe maybe it can help with personalization. So could you make it more personalized communication channels to engage
Mm-hmm.
patients, but not clinical decision making? We don't think that's
Mm-hmm.
relevant just yet, because there's just too many issues with AI. As a nurse, when you're hearing about AI and how it's going to potentially take your job, and do what you do.
So,
Yeah, exactly. I would be curious, what are you hearing at the higher levels? And do you see the usefulness of AI, and what you think it can or can't do for nurses as they kind of navigate this?
one, I want to say, I think it's funny how everyone is concerned about AI when AI has been around for a while. If you've ever interfaced with any company online and saw that chat feature at the bottom of the screen, that was AI. If you've ever called a automated service line and you had to speak your answer and it kind of put you into an algorithm to determine what response to give to you, that was AI. So AI has been around for a while. It being in healthcare the way it is now is fairly new and novel, but it's been around for a while and it's been successful in other industries. And so I am not afraid that AI is taking my job because it cannot think like a human, right? We still need people to manage and run the AI, but what I think it can do is cut down time. I'm a fan of ChatGPT. And what AI looks like for me in my world is creating smart sets where instead of me writing out a whole letter, I can say, create a message for this patient regarding a conversation we talked about, and send the email and have it summarize it. That just saved me 10 minutes of my time. Thank you so much. I can go ahead and use that 10 minutes for someplace else. I think AI is very much a tool for efficiency. It's not a tool for replacement. And so if we know how to maximize and use it properly, we can be more productive or, have more efficiency and maybe decompress some of the role, the task of the nurse because we're using it for standard ordering or we're using it for smart set communication or adaptive communication and streamlining ways that we operate. I think AI can help with that. Nothing to be afraid of, but people don't like change and people don't like the unknown. And if they're unable to fully conceptualize something, there's a little bit of fear in that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I have a background in engineering. AI used to be called machine learning, algorithms. To your point, Facebook, every time you open Facebook and it recommended a friend or some ad to you, that was AI. So we've always been around AI. It's just ChatGPT exploded because it was a
Mhm.
new interface to
Mhm.
AI that we never experienced before, right? And so that's how I kind of looked at it. But also for healthcare, I think that people have to think of it as like a really smart intern. It doesn't know everything you know when it comes to the functionality of your job and really the value what you bring to the job. But it can do things like you said, help you get things done faster, can automate certain tasks, but
Mhm.
also it can even help with research or even get you started with care plans and do different things that you may take you a while to kind of set up, but it can at least get you started and you can take it to
Yeah.
the last. Because really, let's be honest, 80% is the 80-20 rule. So 80% of something is just
Mhm.
the setting up, getting it all ready. That last 20% makes all the difference. And that's where you bring your
Mhm.
uniqueness, your expertise. And that's where AI can kind of help you get to the 80%. And you focus that time on that 20% that's going to give you the maximum value for that project. So to your point, it's not to be afraid of, but it's something to be aware of, and
Yeah.
hoping all nurses and healthcare organizations start to, utilize it and not be afraid of it and kind of move it forward. Speaking of moving forward, I mean, you're doing some innovative things, not just with building your business, but also in social media. And that was a big thing. We're seeing a lot of nurse influencers, doctor influencers out there in social media. Why is that important to building your brand as a nurse or just a healthcare professional in this new age of social media and speaking the value that you can bring to the audience? What does that mean for you and why do it now? What's the
Mhm.
goal? How should nurses think about it?
I want to start with the disclaimer that I don't see myself as an influencer. I see myself as an educator. The word influencer has so many different nuances that it sometimes makes me cringe because that is a job. Influencing is a job on social media. And to me, this is not a job. This is just my passion and my life's work. I was born to be an educator, period. Nursing is not my first degree. I've always been educating. I've always had a knack for taking complex topics and making them consumable for the end user. Whether or not I was at the bedside and I was a nurse and I was basically helping parents understand what the provider was saying, because people would say, yes, of course. And then the doctor leaves and they're like, what? So I've always had that knack of just kind of translating complicated things and just making it relatable. So I'm an educator and I like to talk. And so public speaking is never an issue for me. Instagram was the perfect platform for me. I can share my 2 cents, I can be radical, and it takes 20 seconds, and then I'm off doing something else. However, I do think one, just having a personal brand outside of working, outside of the profession, is just good for a person, period. It just helps you with understanding what is your mission and vision in life. And not necessarily saying you're running yourself like a corporation, but having some standards, having a goal, having something to work forward to, having metrics for yourself, and saying, this is who I am. So that when someone asks you, tell me about yourself, you're not listing off titles and tasks. I'm a mom, I'm a nurse, I'm a this, I'm a that. Like, those are titles and tasks. It doesn't tell me who you are at all. I guarantee you, 9 out of 10 people, if you ask them to introduce themselves or tell you about themselves, they're going to rattle off a list of how they serve other people. But that still does not tell me who you are. And so having a personal brand lets people know who you are. And when you go to my social media, you have a sense of Tiff. I am a nurse. I'm in nursing leadership, right? And I do nursing differently. Yes. I also like to have a lot of fun, and I'm very much abrupt and I speak my mind and there's no qualms about it. And then I also have this very much spiritual, out of this world, universal, divine part to me that I share as well. And you can tell that from my Instagram, from my social media. Now, all of my social media platforms look different because there's different audiences on those platforms. So LinkedIn Tiff doesn't look the same as Instagram Tiff, doesn't look the same as TikTok Tiff, and that's on purpose because those platforms are different and you want to maximize the differences. But the brand is all the same. What you see is what you get. And if you meet me in person, it's the same. It's not a persona. I think one, nurses have an identity outside of their title and their profession. I'm Tiff, I'm not just a nurse. But there's a lot of nurses who are super proud of their degree and their profession. And so on social media, that's what they lead with because they're very proud of it. But I don't want them to forget that behind the degree and the credentials and the title, they are a human, they're a person, and there's a lot more to them than them showing up for work and taking care of others. Having that
Mm.
personal brand or having a brand period just shows people your mission and your promise. And that's what it is. Why is this needed now? Because social media technically is still fairly new in the grand scheme of things. There's still lots of different platforms that are still popping up and gaining traction. It's a way to communicate in this day and age. And so when you have that presence and you're connecting with others, and nursing has a big community on social media, your brand just shows your mission, how you show up in the world, and your promise.
Now, I will say there's this story about the digital natives and versus folks that didn't come this honestly. Like I grew up, there was no internet, right? And so this is new. But then there's folks like my brother and sister who are like 12 years younger than me. They grew up with this. My kids, this is all they know. And so I think,
Mhm.
social media is a new way of communicating. And it's just like anything, any tool. TV was new at one time, radio was new. You
Mhm.
have to learn the medium, right? The more you get on social media and build your presence. And I like what you said, you bring your full self to it. Then guess what? You attract the people that like you, get to know, like, and then eventually trust you. And you'll be
Yes.
amazed at what doors opened up. I'm sure you can count countless times. For instance, this is how we connected on social media. Countless
Yes.
times that you'll find new opportunities that are just on the other side of you being your authentic
Mhm.
self and being consistent out there on social media. And so building that brand is really just associations. And then, I'm looking at your background, see you're a Delta. You see, I went to FAMU, Florida A&M. So those are things that we're bringing to the table, even as we're still in a professional environment. But then
Mhm.
people who are associated with those type of things, oh, I like her because she's a Delta, or I like him because he went to
Mhm.
FAMU. And I think,
Mhm.
that's so key that you have to build that presence out there, especially in this new era, because that's the new way of communicating. And that's the new way you're going to find new opportunities. We highly encourage all of our nurses to be out there on social media and build their brand as well as others, because it's just a new way of communicating. But more importantly, I think even doctors, they want to admit it. Yes, they do research on and find things on social media and connect with folks that way. I went to a conference recently and they were just talking about like healthcare sales in general is changing. Usually you will go in and sit in, get a lunch meeting and try to have a conversation, try to influence in that way. But 9 times out of 10, best way to connect with folks is on LinkedIn and having conversations
Mhm.
with them that way first. And then they kind of say, okay, yeah, I get to know you. And then they look at your
Mhm.
page and see, who you connected with. Then that instant social connection happens. And so it makes the conversation and the sale even easier. Yeah, we're highly big pushers for like communicating and being out there on social media and building that brand, especially in healthcare, because there's just so much information out there, and just having the right people you trust and building that trust with
Mhm.
your community is going to be even more important for the future, right? So I commend you for, being out there. Wow, this is amazing. You kind of talked a little bit about how nurses get burnout. We talked about all the different things and technology and AI. And then finally, we kind of discussed a little bit about the importance of social media. Tiffany, this has been a great conversation. I mean, where can people find you and get your resources that can help them?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn sharing my 2 cents at Tiffany E. Gibson. I am on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. I think I'm still on X. I'm not sure. At New Nurse Academy. Or you can just type in Tiffany Gibson and finds me. I enjoy connecting with the masses. I enjoy the community that social media brings. There, as humans, we are social beings. We like community. We like to find our tribe and to build and grow and learn with our tribe. One thing I don't like about social media is the commiseration, and I see that often in the nursing world. To me, I'm always trying to find a solution. If I'm not part of the solution, then I'm part of the problem. And if I'm silent, then sometimes that means you're complicit if you're not saying anything. And so social media has amazing pros in that you can reach a lot of people just by using your phone. And so in my little corner of the internet, I want to just show nurses how to just show up differently at work and in life and to be authentic. And that's the new nurse mindset for New Nurse Academy.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Tiffany, it's been wonderful talking to you, and wish you
Yeah.
well. Let's connect again. Everyone, go check out her
Mm.
pages. Hope you enjoyed this conversation on how you can avoid burnout and building up your organization to bring their authentic
Mhm.
selves every day. So thank you, everyone. Have a good one.